Dear friends, they say when you laugh, the world laughs with you, but when you cry alone. To avoid turning your later years into a time of sadness, it's best not to share certain secrets with your children. Even a moment of letting something slip can turn your peaceful days into ones filled with sorrow and regret. There are 3 specific secrets that, if revealed, could bring unnecessary trouble and pain, even causing family rifts. So what are these 3 secrets? Let's explore some everyday stories to understand better. Firstly, the disagreements between my parents. My sister, N, got married and moved to a place more than 10 kilometers away from home. Although her job isn't too demanding, she only visits our parents once a month. Like any child, she wishes she could spend weekends, holidays, or occasional gatherings with our family. However, every time I go home, I get a headache because my parents argue constantly, always blaming each other. Sister N often shares her frustrations, explaining that our father has always been very controlling, even when we were young. Whatever he said was the final word, and my mom and us kids had to agree and follow without question. Our mom was gentle and patient when she was younger, which kept the peace at home. But as they've aged, her tolerance has waned, and their arguments have become a daily routine. One evening, the whole family had just sat down to dinner when Dad grumbled, "This soup is so bland. Do we lack salt or what? And the food has no flavor at all." Mom immediately snapped back. "Don't you remember the doctor told you to eat less salt because of your condition? Or are you just tired of living and want to join the ancestors early?" "If so, I'll start cooking salty meals from tomorrow," she added, lowering her voice. "You don't follow your diet, and one day you'll die because of it." Hearing this, Dad shouted, "Now you're cursing me, aren't you?" Another time, Sister Ann brought her kids over to visit. While eating, her son leaned over the table to grab the best piece of food. Grandma corrected him, "If you want something, ask your mom to get it for you. It's not polite to reach across the table like that. Remember, you should be mindful of others while eating." Dad, however, scoffed, saying he's just a kid. What does he know about manners? Even adults don't always follow those rules. So why should he? Mom's face turned red with anger. "Are you talking about me? Kids need to be taught manners early, or they'll grow up to be rude." These kinds of arguments happen all the time. There's never a visit where the house is filled with joy. They don't even close the doors when they argue. So as soon as I reach the end of the street, I hear from the neighbors that my parents have been at it again. Sister N says she's tried to talk to them many times, asking them to be more patient and harmonious as role models for their grandchildren. But after a day or 2 of peace, everything goes back to the way it was. A story of Mr. T's parents. Mr. T's father was once a successful and admired director, leading a company with thousands of employees. He was respected and even feared by many, with several female employees and business partners admiring him. However, when he retired, life at home became monotonous. He spent his days at home with his wife, which led to feelings of boredom and irritability. He started to nitpick and criticize her, from her small gestures to the way she dressed. On the other hand, his wife also found more opportunities to observe and criticize him closely. Though just over 60, Mr. T's father still retained his charming, robust demeanor. Young women, even those young enough to be his daughters, were often captivated by him, treating him with affection and admiration. He enjoyed these interactions, engaging in lively conversations, which made his wife feel as if she was sitting on a bed of nails, glaring at him every few minutes. After these incidents, the couple would engage in cold wars, not only with each other but also with their children and grandchildren. Mr. T's father would sit silently in a corner, smoking, while his mother would claim she was too tired to eat or talk to anyone. The burden then fell on the children, who would take turns persuading their father and comforting their mother in an effort to restore peace. According to psychologists, living together until old age doesn't always guarantee a life filled with happiness. Dr. Tamley explains that in younger years, worries about making a living, raising children, and buying a home can overshadow personal conflicts between spouses. However, in old age, when there's no more work to do, and the couple spends most of their time at home together, it's hard to avoid feelings of irritation toward each other. Retirement can also bring about a significant shock, especially for those who held busy, high-ranking positions as they suddenly feel useless. Experts also note that in youth, emotions run high. Conflicts are often loud and expressive, something couples refer to as hot wars. But as they age, after years of building up frustrations, these conflicts become more subtle and simmer quietly, like a pot on the brink of boiling over. In old age, when emotions have mellowed, conflicts often manifest as cold wars where couples avoid talking to prevent arguments. To reduce conflicts in old age, experts suggest creating more job opportunities for the elderly and encouraging their participation in local and social activities to keep them engaged and feeling useful. Children should also encourage their parents to exercise, join poetry clubs, and limit idle time. The more time elderly couples spend together without other distractions, the more likely arguments will arise. In family life, it's hard to avoid tensions between spouses. However, as we age, it's wise not to share too much about our dissatisfaction with our spouse with our children, as it can disrupt family harmony. If the spouse finds out, it can damage the relationship. If the children find out, they might develop negative feelings toward their parents. When conflicts between parents increase, siding with one parent over the other can hurt both. Therefore, it's best for the couple to find a way to resolve their issues quietly and tactfully. This is the wise approach that those with sensitivity and understanding can achieve. Second, savings. Mr. D, now 69 years old, has a son and a daughter. His daughter married and moved far away, while his son bought a house in the city. Mr. D's wife passed away 10 years ago, leaving him alone in the countryside. When he fell sick or had an accident, no one was there to care for him. A few years ago, he noticed his vision was getting worse. Everything seemed blurry, and sometimes he even saw dark spots. The village doctor told him he had cataracts and needed surgery as soon as possible. Mr. D took the bus to the city to see his son, hoping for help. However, his son greeted him with indifference. When Mr. D mentioned that he needed more money for the surgery, his son gave him only a small amount and suggested he ask his daughter for the rest. Frustrated and hurt, Mr. D cried as he called his daughter, who eventually sent him the money, but also reminded him how he had spent most of his savings on his son in the past. Mr. D was once a capable man who had even started a small business and saved some money. However, he made the mistake of telling his son exactly how much he had saved. Since his wife had passed away, he thought his son would take care of him in his old age, so he didn't hold back any secrets. After learning about the savings, his son came to him for money whenever he needed something: a car, a house, even his children's education. Mr. D advised his son to be self-reliant, but his son replied, "Why should I? You have all this money saved up for me to spend." Meanwhile, his daughter was upset, feeling that Mr. D favored his son too much. What Mr. D never expected was that after his son had spent all his savings, he became distant, neglecting and even resenting Mr. D, calling him a burden due to his illnesses and wasteful spending. One of Mr. D's biggest regrets is that he didn't keep his savings a secret from his son. Family bonds can sometimes only go so far. People often say that blood is thicker than water, but there are those who only care about their own gain, showing little genuine affection. No matter how sincerely you treat them, you might only end up getting hurt. So as we grow older, it's important to keep some savings for ourselves, especially for times of illness. While we may become weaker with age, we should not rely too heavily on our children to maintain our dignity. Savings provide us with a sense of security and empower us to face life's uncertainties. The money in our hands is our shield, helping us enjoy a peaceful old age. If we reveal all our savings, we might end up like Mr. D, regretting a moment of weakness that turned our later years into a time of sorrow. Third, a biased choice. Mrs. H shared a story about her husband. She's been married for 10 years, and although life has had its challenges, She and her husband have always managed to overcome them together. Her in-laws are retired intellectuals. When she and her husband got married, they had just graduated from college, and her husband's younger brother had just started university. Her in-laws would often talk to them about the younger brother's needs, like wanting a new laptop or taking Japanese lessons. These conversations usually ended with her husband offering to give his brother some money, even though they weren't well off. She noticed that her husband didn't want his parents involved in important events. For instance, he kept it a secret from them when he received his master's degree, even though they lived nearby. When he had an accident or when the house needed repairs, he never thought of asking them for help. Mrs. H would usually inform them, but their response was often awkward and distant. When her husband was hospitalized after an accident, his parents visited him like they were mere guests. He eventually blocked them on all communication channels, saying he had reached his limit. Mrs. H knows that her husband's wounds are deep and hard to heal, but she believes that his parents do care for him. They may have been careless, but they're not entirely to blame. Now that their son has cut them off, what can she do to mend the relationship? Dear readers, just as fingers on a hand are not the same length, parents find it challenging to treat all their children equally, especially in large families. A biased choice is not necessarily a big issue. However, if favoritism is openly displayed, it can cause conflict among siblings and strain the relationship between parents and their children. Such conflicts often lead to rifts in family bonds, with some even cutting ties due to perceived unfair treatment. When children feel they are not a priority to their parents, they may lose the desire to care for them in return. Therefore, wise parents will think carefully about their actions to avoid causing harm to their family relationships. The Stepfather's Story. He was over 50 years old when he married my mother, mostly to have someone to share his old age with. He wasn't particularly remarkable, except for his cooking skills and his genuine heart. But as I got to know him, I came to understand the true meaning of family. 3 years after my father passed away, he came into our lives. Compared to my father, he seemed ordinary, with nothing special to offer. But my mother, also in her 50s, needed companionship. At that age, the main thing she wanted in a partner was good character. And in this, he was more than qualified. He was known far and wide as an honest and simple man. On the day they first met, he was nervous, knowing he didn't have much to offer. He lived in a small house, had a modest pension as a retired worker, and was also helping out his newly married son. Honestly, my mother only agreed to meet him out of respect for the matchmaker. But in the end, she developed a liking for him because of his cooking. After they met, he said, "Mrs. L, I know you have everything you need. Honestly, I don't have much to offer. But let's give it a try and see if we get along. Why don't you stay for a simple dinner tonight?" His sincerity touched my mother, so she stayed. He didn't let her lift a finger, preparing a soup with 4 different vegetables and a special dish of pumpkin and meat. My mother enjoyed it so much that she couldn't stop eating. Before she left, he told her, "If you want more, come by any time. My home may be modest, but making this pumpkin dish is no trouble at all." My mother met several other men after that, but despite their better circumstances, she chose him. Her reason, though perhaps selfish, was simple. After spending half her life taking care of my father, she wanted someone to take care of her for a change. And so, they became a couple. One day, the 3 of us, along with his 3 sons, had a meal together. I arranged it at a fancy 5-star hotel, wanting to show respect but also to demonstrate my own status. As we left the hotel, he quietly said to me, "From now on, we're family, father and son. Next time you want to treat me, just take me to a local eatery. I'll be more comfortable and we won't waste money." His genuine words made me realize how foolish my pride was. Trying to outsmart a kind-hearted old man felt shameful. He took great care of my mother, who often told me she needed to lose weight, a sign of her happiness. He really was an excellent cook. Once, while eating together, I couldn't help but tell my wife, "Next time he cooks, you should learn from him." My wife, clearly uninterested and even a bit annoyed, got upset. He quickly intervened, saying, "I've never done much right in life, except for cooking a few good meals. You all have important work to do, so don't bother learning from me. If you're hungry, just come over. The worst thing is cooking with no one to eat it." When we left that day, he packed up a lot of food for us to take home. As he handed it to me, he said, "Please don't compliment my cooking too much. Honestly, it embarrasses me. A man who only knows how to cook and not much else shouldn't be praised for that." As we drove home, I shared his words with my wife, who commented that he seemed born to serve others, content with staying humble. She added, "Our mother is lucky she's found someone to treat her like a queen in her old age." I glanced at my wife, sensing her disdain for him. After all, he was still an outsider to her, a bit embarrassing. The next day, I moved into a new house. He and my mother came over to perform the traditional housewarming ceremony, ensuring everything was done right. But when it was time to eat, he was nowhere to be found. I searched everywhere and even called him, but his phone was off. He seemed to have planned his absence perfectly, returning only after the guests had left. He collected the leftover food in containers he had brought and quietly told my mother, "I'll cook something fresh for you tonight, but I'll eat these leftovers myself." My mother, upset, said, "Why do you have to eat leftovers every day? Do you know it bothers me to see you like this?" He reassured her, saying, "Don't be upset. It bothers me more to see things go to waste. I've worked hard for everything I have. We can't help our children much, so we should save where we can." His words left my mother feeling guilty, so she decided to tell me. Hearing her speak on his behalf made me feel conflicted and ashamed. Over time, I grew more fond of him, even relying on him at times. He quietly did many things for us, fixing the plumbing, taking our child to and from daycare, and caring for my mother without sleep when she was hospitalized. It wasn't until after she was discharged that he mentioned it to us. Then, unexpectedly, he fell seriously ill. While taking my child to daycare, he collapsed from a stroke and was left paralyzed. His sons were initially very supportive, but as time went on, they became less involved. Eventually, one by one, they all but disappeared. To my shock, my mother also suggested separating from him. They hadn't legally registered their marriage, so it was just a matter of walking away. She told me, "I'm too old to take care of him. I can't be a burden on you by bringing a disabled husband into your life." This was the harsh reality. Not wanting my mother to be the bad guy, I decided to play that role myself. I told him, lying in his hospital bed, "Mr. D, my mother is sick." He began to cry, and I forced myself to say, "We still have work to do, and my mother's health isn't good. How about this? After you're discharged, you return to your home. I'll hire a caregiver for you, and I'll cover the cost. I'll visit you often." He stopped crying and repeatedly nodded, grateful, saying, "That would be wonderful. No need for a caregiver though, really." As I left the hospital, tears filled my eyes. I wasn't sure if I felt relieved or deeply guilty. I hired a caregiver and paid for a year in advance. I also had his house renovated. I tried to do everything I could, not just for him, but to ease my own conscience. On the day he was discharged, I didn't go myself but sent a driver. The driver later told me, "Mr. D wanted me to thank you. He said even his own sons wouldn't have done so much." Those words comforted me a little, but the comfort didn't last. The cold new year arrived, and without him at home, we felt a bit lonely. There was no one willing to spend hours in the kitchen making a feast for us. We ate our New Year's Eve dinner at a 5-star hotel, but it didn't feel the same. On the way home, my son said, "I want to eat Grandpa's carp dish." My wife gave him a sharp look, but he only became more upset. "Why didn't you let Grandpa come home for New Year? You're all so mean." My wife slapped him hard, but the slap felt like it hit me too, leaving my face burning with shame. One sentence from my son shattered our self-justifications. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw my mother's eyes were also red. It was clear, this was going to be a joyless New Year's Eve. I missed last year when he was still with us. A warm, happy family is often built on the quiet sacrifices of one person. I wondered who he was spending the holiday with and if he missed us. At home, after the first New Year's bell rang, I drove to see him. He hobbled to the door, smiling through tears when he saw me. Inside his cold home, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I called his son, scolding him, and then started making dumplings for him. The caregiver had gone home for the holiday, but he had enough food prepared to last until the 15th. I silently blamed my mother as I made the dumplings. The warmth of the dumplings finally brought a bit of holiday spirit into his home. With each bite, tears fell. Early on New Year's Day, I left his house, feeling dizzy from the wine. I parked under his building and walked alone on the cold streets, my heart heavy. My phone rang. It was my wife. "Where are you?" she asked. I snapped, "I'm in the home of a lonely old man." "Got it. What kind of people are we? When he could still walk, we used him. Now that he can't, we send him away. Have we lost all our humanity? And we talk about morality and righteousness. I despise it." On the empty street, I cursed myself. After venting my anger, I didn't hesitate to turn back, put him on my back, and carried him out. He struggled and asked, "What are you doing?" I firmly replied, "We're going home. Grandpas are meant to be loved. How could we ever send you away?" My friends, do you understand the simple truth here? Parents don't ask for much. A simple greeting like, "How are you today?" Or a small gesture like bringing them some food, cooking a simple dinner, covering them with a blanket, or helping them with a warm coat or gloves can make them feel warm and happy for a long time. Sometimes, I wonder how I want my children to treat me in the future. I believe life is a cycle. The way you treat your parents now is how your children will treat you one day. Dear friends, the hardest debt to repay is that to your parents. Let's care for our parents with a heart full of gratitude and filial piety. Life doesn't demand that we be the best, but that we do our best. Don't wait until it's too late to realize you didn't cherish your parents while they were still here.
If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.